Good afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Success Sadhana. My name is JM, and I welcome you all to a program today where we continue our series, Superpower series. And today's is session number 2. The topic is Focus is Peace, Distraction is Torture. With the speaker today, Vaish, a veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and former monk. We have around 9 members on Zoom. People are still dialing in, and I have Kaylee helping me out in managing social media today. Good afternoon, Vaish. Welcome back to another episode of Success Sadhana.
Thank you so much, JM. I'm really happy to be back. Great to see all of you, and thanks for joining. Charles, Rajmohan, Anapayani, Vicky, JM twice. That's good news. Mayank's autopilot is here. Yan, welcome back. Kaylee Kunja, Kennedy, Radhakripa. Great. Pradeep's here too. Fantastic. So we have opportunities because we have a great gift we've been given. We've been given a great gift, which is the human body has a mind, and we have a way to express our free will. And there's a lot of guidance available from reliable sources. One of those sources that I'll be speaking from today is one of the ancient wisdom literatures called the Bhagavad Gita. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, who's the teacher, who's teaching his student Arjuna, talks about the importance of the mind and keeping the mind focused on what we want or what's best for us, more importantly. And he gives analogies of the mind. A couple of them are that the mind can be swept away like a boat on water that's swept away by the wind. If any of you have ever been on a sailboat, and when a strong wind comes, it can pull the boat along drastically if it's a very strong wind. And similarly, Krishna says in the ways in which the mind sometimes gets dragged in various directions. He recommends equanimity, being able to still the mind, to have a calm mind so that one can observe the world not from an emotional point of view, but to see it as an unfoldment of what's supposed to be in one's life. It's hard to see that when we're emotionally involved or when we're being dragged along and feel helpless. Another example or analogy that Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita about the mind is that of an ocean. And when the rivers are flowing into the ocean from various angles and in millions of places, the ocean stays its course and it stays at the same level. And he said, in the same way, even though there are many sensory inputs coming to us at every moment, a person who's practiced focusing the mind, controlling the mind, will be able to remain still, even though there's sensory input that's pouring into the mind from various directions. A third, since you asked, is that of a tortoise. So many analogies that are helpful. A tortoise has a natural defense system, its shell, and its ability to pull all of its limbs within the shell, including its head. So Krishna says, a person who's able to withdraw from sensory experience that is not helpful, that may be entangling at the right times, just like the tortoise, when there's danger, draws its limbs within the shell, is protected. A plethora of analogies about the mind. And we'll go in some practical points, but perhaps we can start with observing our own minds. So why don't we do this? Try sitting up a little straighter than you were a second ago, and then close your eyes. And as you're doing that, just take a moment to observe your breath. And if there's anything you've been anxious about or any thoughts that have been pestering you, just let's take a minute to de-link from your daily life, from your life situation. It's our choice to either link to what's going through our minds or to de-link. So at this point, just try noticing your breath. Breath is sustaining us. We can be grateful for it because it's a free gift. Nice oxygen coming in. When we don't have our breath and then we get it back, we'll be so grateful that all the other details of our life may not matter as much in that moment. So just be grateful on that level for your breath. And relax and just be present, and then notice your thoughts. And for a moment, become the observer of your thoughts, the witness, as if you're standing by and watching. In my neighborhood, there are a lot of trees, and the city maintains them. The other day, they were taking down a dead tree. It was gigantic. And I went out and I just watched as they were disassembling the tree. I wasn't involved. I was just watching. So don't get involved with your thoughts. Just watch them and notice that you can stand 1 block away and observe how they're going on. And if there's any thoughts that keep coming up, you can employ the system of TLN, tender loving neglect. Neglect just means, don't worry about it. Let it take its own course. Let it go. And this is a good state of mind to be in when we chant our mantra. Take a moment, as we've done, to observe our breath, observe our thoughts. Notice that we have a choice to let go of various pestering ideas, desires that keep pushing us. Just neglect them for a little while. And now, while we're here and a little bit comfortable because we're slightly detached, I'll chant the mantra, 2-syllable mantra, Rama, which introduces us to the idea of inner happiness, spiritual pleasure. So if you want to repeat it with me, I'm going to do it with each exhalation, or if you want to just listen, that's okay too. Rama,
Rama,
Rama, Rama. And just appreciate the fact that at any moment you can become the observer. The world takes many odd courses and moves in bewildering ways, but we don't have to grab on to everything and be pulled. We have a safe space, and we can also take shelter of the mantra to fortify ourselves and be absorbed in a higher spiritual energy. So now go back to your breath. You might wiggle your fingers and toes, rub your hands together, and open your eyes, and welcome back. Take a little journey now and then. Good to get away, right?
Yes.
So,
Uh,
yes, go ahead, Jam.
I just had a request to make. As I was looking at the topic, focus is peace, distraction is torture. Our focus gets affected because of various things, internal things, external things, relationship. Like we may have challenges at work, or even we may lose our jobs, or we may have loved ones who may have passed away, and it's very hard. And it might become very difficult to continue to focus or even get on with your daily life. So if you have any guidance, suggestions, how we may be able to deal with such situations and still keep making progress, that will be very beneficial.
Yeah. Well, I'm part of a community. Of course, we all live in some sort of community, hopefully, unless you're completely isolated. And when we're emotionally involved with so many kinds of people, so many people in general, obviously we're going to hear about suffering in various ways. Of course, there's joyful announcements as well. And then, of course, in our own lives, we'll experience loss and sometimes gain and then loss again. So this is something we'll definitely talk about. And throughout the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna prepares us for this inevitability. As I mentioned in a previous talk, he gives a categorical designation to the world we live in as a world of change. And one of the ways that we can interact with the world and with our own minds is to just be prepared for the fact that everything changes and not be overly concerned with the way things should be, but just dealing with the way things are. And one of the things that changes all the time is our body. And Krishna gives this example in the Bhagavad Gita, saying that the body's constantly changing. And if we learn to be more the observer of our body and think of it more as an Uber, we're just taking a ride for a little while and we're using it for certain purposes, we won't be as dismayed by the various changes that the body goes through. Can also expect that others will come and go in our lives. And he gives a wide perspective of how to view what's happening without becoming morose. And that is that we're not our bodies, and also others in our lives are not their bodies either. For instance, if you have a pet you're attached to and the pet dies, how concerned should you be? Of course, there's a sense of loss, but it's a natural course of nature. Or if someone in our life passes, then how to think about that. Krishna says that actually the soul or the Atma, the consciousness within, never dies. It's never affected by the material environment. The material environment changes, and we may move from one situation to another, and loved ones may move from one situation to another. But if we have educated ourselves about what is reality, that is, that the conscious living being is permanent and the body's temporary, then when that change takes place, we won't be affected in the same way as someone who doesn't see that. In other words, we're able to process it. We always sense loss, but from change, but when we're able to process and see that this was an inevitable change, and also it didn't mean the end of the soul. It just means that's another aspect of change in the world. So going to the first slide, why don't we do that? We'll follow a logical progression. And very specifically, the topic here is focus is nectar, distraction is torture. And then we might say, well, what should I focus on? And what is distraction? So there's good guidance within the wisdom literatures about what the purpose of life is and what our nature is and where we've received the best return on our focus. If we focus on the trivial, then the result will be trivial. If we focus on that which is significant, then the result will be significant. So there's a sense of losing when we become distracted from the purpose in our life. And when we're focused on the best possible item or object of focus, then we'll feel happiness. That's a very simple concept. But it's good to remember because you'll see the next slide says that we're sparks of the supreme consciousness. So we're also conscious, says the Bhagavad Gita, but we're parts of a supreme consciousness. And when we see a spark separated from the fire, it then loses its own brilliance. So there's a way in which when we become distracted from our source, then we also become diminished. So the next slide says, where attention goes, energy flows. And this is one of the main teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is asking to those who study the Bhagavad Gita to decide, where do you want to go? Because you're self-directing in that way. If you put your attention in a certain direction, that's where you're going to go. But oftentimes we simply accept the momentum coming to us from various, from previous activities or from the culture we enter into, and everyone says, hey, just go with the culture, go with what everyone tells you. But in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, try to see the bigger picture. Where did you come from? How did you get here in the first place? And where are you going when you leave this world? And be aware of the fact that you're self-directing. Don't just be pushed by previous momentum or by a wrong idea about what's best for you. So that brings us to the next slide, which is the desire tree. It's a sublime picture, isn't it? It's a very thought-provoking scene, especially if I describe it as a desire tree, which is mentioned in the ancient wisdom literatures, called a kalpavriksha, or a tree that one might sit under that will understand our thoughts and fulfill any desire that we have. Imagine that you're sitting under that tree, and then you search your heart and mind. What do I really want? Where am I going? And oftentimes, when people take the opportunity, for instance, now during the end of the year, to sit down and decide, well, what do I want for the next year? It takes a lot of thought. We decide, well, it's too difficult to think about. I'm so busy, I don't have time to think about what I really want. You could go through a whole year like that, right? And just move from one emergency to the next, or from one urgency to the next, even if it's not an emergency. Could seem like it's urgent. I have to do this. I have to do that. If we skip the opportunity to look inside and also examine what's most important in our lives, we may miss the focal point of our life, of what we really want, what's the best for us. And this is another topic, that there are material goals that we might reach for, And of course, in managing our lives, we have to have some sense of organization and moving towards goals like financial goals. If you don't have a plan, then generally you'll end up being dependent on others. If you don't have a health plan either, you'll probably end up having to do a GoFundMe the next time something happens. And there are various ways in which we have to keep it together here in the material world. But what's our ultimate goal in life? What do we really want? Some would say, well, I want $10 million. Why? Why do you want it? Will it make your life better? And that's a topic for discussion. And that's one that comes up in the Bhagavad Gita, that what really makes us happy? What's the ultimate goal that we can focus on that will make us feel fulfilled? And of course, there are millions of songs, books, and poems that talk about people's material desires not being sufficient to bring happiness. So in the next slide, we look at the two paths of the mind, bound and free. And the Bhagavad Gita describes how the mind, when it's pushed by urges, is bound. When we deliberately engage our minds in rising above these urges, when we understand that we're not our body and we have a higher goal for ourselves, spiritual goal, they said the mind is free. So can you think of an example of a mind pushed by urges? Have you ever experienced this or noticed it, that you've been pushed by an urge of your mind to do something? That's an underhand pitch, because if you don't
Yes,
if you don't give an
fear.
answer, then I'm going to start giving answers for you. Yes, go ahead.
Fear.
Yeah, do you have a specific time when you were afraid of something and you were pushed by that?
Yes, when we end up focusing too much on someone else's journey and worrying about their choices and decisions, and hoping that they'll make good choices, knowing that from past experience, we fear and expect the worst. And we draw ourselves into that fear, and that controls our mind, which then draws in other symptoms like anxiety.
In that general scenario, if you were to name it, that type of fear, and you said fear of blank, what would you say the fear is if you gave one word?
Negative choices.
Fear that you'll make the wrong choice?
Not me, someone else.
That's somebody else.
I always do my best to make the most best choices.
So, like with a little intuition, I might think that, okay, maybe somebody that we're responsible for, or that we love or care about, and they make bad choices, and then we're afraid for them or something like that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. It's relatable. Anybody else notice a scenario where you were pushed, your mind was pushed by some urge? More specific, the more points you get. Yes, Anapaini.
When seeing an ad online, we can think that we need that item. So we can get pushed by those urges or suggestions by external media.
Yeah, it's perfect. Amazing, isn't it? So there's a way that when you focus on something, it becomes more prevalent also, isn't it? Especially electronically. If you look at a backpack, then everywhere you go, I don't know how it works. You all probably do, but there's a way that every other window I open says, here's our backpacks. Why don't you choose this one? It leads to, for one thing, yeah, the mind can be going, you can be looking for something online and then see a picture and then, oh, yeah, I got to go there. Shankari.
I was thinking of the same thing because it's the holiday season. Every time I open my computer, this sale, that sale, and the percentages, it keeps going up as the Christmas day approaches. And that can lead one to. But another thing I was thinking was when somebody says something to me, which I have not taken too well, immediately the mind says retort. And that's the time when we need to keep cool and not really open our mouth.
Yeah. So we can notice that definitely there are things that pull us in a certain direction, offering us something, or if we're offended or somebody says something insulting to us, then the mind is definitely pushed by some kind of urge. Rajmohan?
Oh yeah, it's the same fear that someone mentioned earlier. So especially when you take flights, the flight goes at roughly 112, 115 miles per hour at the ground, and then it takes off. And at that time, I don't know, something happens that it tells you that I don't know, I feel pretty bad about that particular moment that coming back from an engineering perspective, I did not design the engine, the GE engine of that aircraft and all those things. In that moment, it's pretty hard what is going to happen. So I write off my life to God. Okay, this engine has to be tested for a long time, so everything will be fine. And then just for that few seconds, I have the fear and there's an urge to do something, but nothing can be done. So I write off my life to God and then come back alive after the next few seconds. Same goes with the turbulence.
Yeah, and if we make a list of the ways in which our mind is pushed by urges, we could come up with a long list. If we become mindful of the way that we engage with our mind throughout the day, we might notice it more too. Oftentimes I'm pulled from one thing to the next because the mind has an urge and then I just go there, or I respond to somebody in a certain way, or I feel fearful of something that's some impending doom. So this is the mind, which is under, this is the consciousness which was controlled by the mind. It's pushed, we're pushed by our own minds. And then we have the second one, which is mentioned in this slide, which is the deliberately engaged mind. And what do we mean by that? What do I mean by that? Go back to the last one. Is deliberately, you've heard me say it many times, but there's a way in which when we deliberate, we become more deliberate. The word Libra stands for the scales. And do you weigh things out and say, what's most important? What's scary? What's not scary? What can I control? What can't I control? In fact, there's lots of things that I can't control and I don't need to worry about because I can't do anything about them anyway. And if I decide those things ahead of time and I decide where's the most important place to put my mind, and then I can deliberately engage my mind. Then my mind is trending towards freedom rather than being caught in a kind of whirlpool of thoughts. If I decide ahead of time, that's one good thing about being human, is we can be deliberate, which means we have to deliberate. Now, in the next slide, it gives a little more philosophical bent to this idea that karma can be described as a force. What is it, the force? It's a force of the actions, the reactions to what we've already done before. And it comes in the form of material consciousness. In other words, we're being pushed right now, as you see that little picture on the side there, that's like the mind, pushing us in a particular direction because of what we've done or experienced before. For instance, if we take it back a step, like a previous lifetime, if you had experiences in your last lifetime, you fell in love with someone who looked a particular way, they weighed 300 pounds, sumo wrestler, and you were in love, and now in this lifetime, because the attachment's still there, when you see somebody that weighs 300 pounds or more, you immediately feel attracted. It's like, oh, I should be with that person. This is an urge that is coming from previous experience in the world, action forced by material consciousness. And it's prompted by karmic momentum. There's a kind of momentum. So a lot of times people think that I'm a free thinker, but the Vedas, the wisdom literatures, say that actually we're being prompted because of our previous associations. So I may say, well, I like this particular kind of music. You like it because of your previous associations. I heard an interview with a musical connoisseur who was also a music critic. She wrote for a living about classical music. And she said, I was a snob. I only liked a particular kind of sophisticated music, classicals, and it had to be perfectly rendered and so forth. And she had a near-death experience in her life. And when she came back from that, her perspective of the world had changed. And she said that after that, even elevator music she appreciated, not just a certain kind of music. Point is that becoming aware of how our mind is being pushed and why it's being pushed. It's because I've had previous experiences, and sometimes we're averse to things. Have you ever had a sense of being naturally averse to particular scenes or people, or say maybe particular animals? You know anybody who's afraid of a particular animal? Just naturally afraid, or they're afraid of water, afraid of heights. My brother, Tom, 2.5 years older than me, I remember anytime when we were traveling, and once we went to the top of the Campanile, I forget how to pronounce it. It's that tower on the Berkeley campus. So my dad used to work there. So that we went up on the tower, he was so afraid because he's afraid of heights. And anytime we'd go on a bridge, some people are afraid of water. They don't want to go in the water. So somebody was going to say something. They know somebody who's afraid of an animal.
Yeah, I was just going to share one person whom I know. She was bit by a dog at a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
And since, and of course, she went through those, I forget, 16, I think, injections or whatever was required. And after that, any dog anywhere, whether it's friendly or not friendly, doesn't matter. The natural distance and protection and everything kicks in, and she's so afraid she stays very far from any dog.
This life experience, and we could see the direct effect on the mind, right?
Yeah.
Anybody else have a recollection of that? Yeah. Who said yeah? Okay, Radha Kripa.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lifetime experience when I saw a fire on the multi-story building on the TV, and then they were trying to bring the people out, and few people jumped. After seeing that impressions, now I have slowly started developing a fear of a height. Since you're stuck down there, you can't come down. That impression is still fresh in my mind. So because of that, I'm very kind of trending now more nervous on the heights. Earlier, I used to have a lot of fun, like going on the top just by having fun there on the top. So just seeing that incident changed my thoughts.
Yes, yeah. And was somebody else going to say something? I thought I heard a voice.
It's me.
Come in. Yes.
That I go hiking on the weekends with my friends, and there were actually several people in the group at different times that they all said they either had a traumatic experience with the dogs or got bitten when they were young age, so naturally they are afraid of dogs. But I brought my dog with me, so their natural instinct is to tell me that, hey, I'm afraid of dogs. I said, okay, I'll keep my distance. And then they see how friendly my dog is with everybody else in the group and how they interact. And then usually by the end of the hike, they go, is it okay if I take a picture standing next to your dog? So, the positive experience. I mean, of course, it depends on the severity of their past negative experience, but it can be undone by the positive reinforcement. And all the dogs that I had, help with people that has, decades of fear of dog to be able to stand next to them in just a couple days.
Right. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that we have there's two aspects of the mind. It's called Icha and Dvesha. So Icha means I'm attracted to something, I desire it, I want to have it. And the other Dvesha, I'm afraid of it or I'm averse to it, I want to get away from it. So the mind is wavering between these 2 points constantly, but it's a mighty force, the mind, and it pushes us in various directions. So therefore, from the slide, we said the mind's pushed by urges, and when we let it take its own course, this is called karma, or action forced by material consciousness. And incidentally, as described in the Bhagavad Gita, we're creating our own next situations in the world and different bodies when we leave the body with a certain kind of consciousness. We're attracted to certain things, we're averse to certain things, and we get accommodated in the next life. So we call this KPM, or action prompted by karmic momentum and urges. So then there's the yoga, which is the next slide, and it's the deliberately engaged mind. I like the picture, a lot of light there. So there's a way that when the mind, when our minds are prompted by spiritually guided intelligence. And what do I mean by that? There's a presupposition with the process of yoga that there's a higher way of thinking, and we can train our minds to rise above Icha and Dvesha and come to spiritual guidance. For instance, as I mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about not overreacting to good or bad situations, or I should say bad or good situations. The mind stays equipoised. And also, when we see beyond just the short-term goals we have in this lifetime, and we think towards what is the ultimate goal of my life and what happens when I leave this particular body, I may have a higher set of priorities. And we can be guided by spiritual intelligence. And this is a state of the deliberately engaged mind. It's quite enlivening, because when we have a sense that we're rising above just the karmically pushed mind and we're taking higher direction, then we'll have a sense of purpose, which is enlivening. We'll notice it ourselves. Now, in the next slide, are you able to show these videos?
Yes.
Okay, why don't you show the one on the left first, the distracted, and then the focused. Are you all ready for a major motion picture? You can get a little popcorn or something and just... We've arranged movie day.
Sometimes our mind wanders, and when we snap back to reality, we have no idea what we missed or how long we were gone. Daydreaming isn't the only thing that causes this inattention blindness. When we talk on the phone while driving, there are periods when we go blind to our environment without realizing it. So billboards, cars, kids playing, even stop signs and red lights can pass us by unnoticed. Certain things may seem harmless, but some activities just aren't safe to combine. Our brain is not wired to pay attention to more than one complex task at a time. What we're actually doing when we think we're multitasking is quickly shifting our focus from one activity to another. So while our mind is engaged in applying makeup, arguing with backseat drivers, fumbling for a water bottle, or a conversation, it's blind to the road. In fact, drivers are 4 times more likely to crash while talking on the phone, and 23 times more likely while texting. Driving can feel uneventful, but it really takes our full attention to keep the car on the road. We're surrounded by distractions that can hijack our focus. Whether we let them is up to us.
And of course, if we take it that we're driving or also through our lives, it takes on a wider sense. And now let's see what we have here on the focus side. The mind can get addicted to distraction. It's a non-productive zone. Distraction just means the mind is spinning, it's idling. It's not doing anything productive or helpful. We're not gaining anything. So it's helpful to have a program to come out of distraction. One of the ways to do that is to read. Learning to read a book or something deep that has philosophy in it, that has something helpful for the mind, and doing it on a regular basis helps to calm the mind, because you go line by line, and then it's a kind of meditative process, because you sit there and think about what you just read. When you do this on a regular basis, even if you commit yourself to a few lines a day or a couple of paragraphs, you'll find that you'll feel a nourishment you don't get from the distractive state of just flipping through a screen. You'll get wisdom, your mind will come alive, and you'll feel better about your life. So try reading instead of just looking at a screen. In fact, read a paper book, not one that has other information available or that has a glow coming from behind it, and see if that doesn't help you to gradually come out of this state of constant distraction. So we give these examples of being distracted. In the first video mentioned while driving. It's something very relatable, and also it has its perils, very real perils. And then a very specific example of a life practice like reading, where we feel arguably more fulfilled by being focused in a certain way. When the mind's focused on a certain object, then it feels more peaceful rather than being drawn in many different directions at once. For instance, sometimes people like to watch football like soccer. We call soccer in America, the people call it football. And people will just watch the ball all day long, and they feel a kind of a sense of peace. Ball's going up, going down. And of course, when it's a material object we're meditating upon, it doesn't stay in that state of peace, but then it springs back to where it was before, or worse, depending on the object that we chose. But when we experiment with the mind and we notice that we have a mind, some people don't even notice they have a mind. They just live their life and are carried away by it, which is, according to the Bhagavad Gita, a mistake. We should be deliberate. We should use the facility of human insight to notice causality, and then notice what's going on with our minds, and then see, do I feel better when I'm more deliberate about what I'm focusing on? Well, the answer is yes. It's so true. When we decide ourselves what's most beneficial for my mind, and then we practice meditating on that, even if it's a little bit at a time, we'll start to feel more peaceful. So in the next slide, we'll have an example. I noticed one day when I was walking somewhere, traveling, and my phone said, searching for network. I was like, oh, that's like my mind. The mind's always searching for a network to join. This is one of the secrets Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita, that the mind's never inactive. It's always going for something. Notice when you go to sleep at night, if you have a problem you're working on, a test the next day or something, you're likely processing it while you sleep. And the mind's always searching. Now, have you ever had the experience where your phone latches onto some network and you go, no, that's not my network, that's somebody else's network? And so the simple direction that we get from the wisdom literatures is choose your network, or it will be chosen for you, because the mind is always searching for a network, but you can decide which one. You can put it in the directions of your mind that this is where we're going. This is the network we're going to be tuned in to. So the next slide talks about how yoga means devoting your mind to the ultimate network. So this is really the subject matter of yoga, and bhakti yoga means there's a higher network. There's an ultimate network. And when you tune into that network, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, you're tuning into the best possible network that you can. And he gives these symptoms when you're tuned in to the spiritual network. So he says that the first thing that you'll experience as you'll feel naturally happy. When you're just going to any old network, there's stimulation, but there's no happiness. There's no sense of satisfaction. And so he said, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma. The word Prasanatma means you'll naturally feel happy in yourself. And then Shochati Kankshati means you're no longer pulled by the dualities of good and bad. You're not worried so much about what's going to happen in the future. And you're not lamenting over what happened in the past. And you're not also, as we discussed before, being pushed by the momentum of your mind. You're able to rise above it. This is called Turiya. Turiya means beyond the urges of the material world. You're in another zone completely. And then the third thing is that you relate to people in a much deeper way, because you see them as spiritual, not material. When I see people as material, then I see the differences. I like this one, I don't like that one. I like people from this place, I don't like people from that place. That's pretty constant. Or I like this kind of body, but not another. Like I like humans, or I like animals, but not these animals, only some animals. I only like kittens. I don't like crocodiles, or whatever it may be, because the consciousness is beyond matter and the body's made of matter. When one is able to experience the ultimate network above the pushings of the mind, one starts to see reality, and reality is beautiful. And the soul within each body is beautiful, even if the body is a little rough. And if it's not rough now, it'll be rough later, because it's always changing. So about focus, the next slide talks about the power of a magnifying glass. I don't know if you've ever thought about it. Maybe you have, if you're some kind of in some kind of engineering, or if you took a physics class, but photons pass through a convex lens and are centered through a single point. So it's deliberately convex, and it's the shape that draws the light to a single point. The shape of it's convex. So the reason I used this was, I'm coming to the next slide, which is reshape your life to focus. Focus doesn't happen just by accident. I love this picture. Sort of an escape from distraction, isn't it? And maybe this person is going off and to the sunrise or the sunset, and is going to do a little meditation and chant some mantra. She has decided that I'm not just going to stay in the distraction zone. I'm going to get away from it. That's a way you could reshape your life, right? Can you think of 2 or 3 other ways that you might reshape your life to be less subjected to distraction?
One way is putting big rocks first. That's very important. That's very satisfying.
Okay, yes. Big rocks means decide what's most important to you, right?
Yeah.
This is a good time of year to do that, isn't it, JM?
Yeah, very important.
End of the year, you could sit down with your piece of paper and a pen I prefer that to anything with a glow behind it because you might get distracted. But turn off everything, get a friendly piece of paper. Paper's friendly. Paper is our friend. It's coming out of my new book. And a nice Bic pen. It's really simple, no frills. It's just a writing instrument. And you just write down, what are my priorities, right? The big rocks first. Shankari?
I was thinking the same. Plan ahead. Just plan out your day, and you know that what you're going to do, so that there are no rooms or no cracks for distraction.
Very good. Yes. Okay. Is there another way anybody can think of eliminating distraction?
I remember you saying several times, same thing may plan. Do preparation the previous day. That helps.
Yeah, prepare ahead of time. And one of the things we can do to prepare is to change your environment a little bit. If you get rid of things that you know you don't need and that distract you, it's very it helps you to focus, get that convex surface so that your mind. If you're doing a project and, oh, this is a good one. Om said, learn forgiveness, let go of expectations. Yes, that's definitely one of the internal practices that Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita. And what I was saying is to eliminate unnecessary necessities. I have things I have to have this. And if you have lots of projects open on your desk or in your room or where you do your creative work, it may be distracting. Piles of things, get it all in order. So you can arrange your life, reshape your life, make it a convex surface so your attention goes in one place. You'll feel more satisfied. And you look at the next slide, it's from a story that comes from one of the wisdom literatures about the arrow maker. Here we have the Macy's parade, but the story took place thousands of years ago where there was an arrow maker and he was sitting in his little arrow making shop and he had to focus. He didn't have a machine. He's doing it by hand. And the king came and went by in a parade. And afterwards, somebody excitedly came into his shop and said, did you see the king? And he said, what king? I didn't see any king. He said, you missed the parade? He said, what parade? He went right by his shop. So when you've got an object of focus, which is you've discerned, you've deliberated and found this is the most important thing for me to focus on, even though there'll be many distractions, you won't notice them because you've got a network to tune into that you know is the most important. So be like the arrow maker. Get your most important items at the top of your list and then practice focusing on those. And then the next talks about this word tivrena. So in the practice of bhakti, which is focusing on the supreme, we have an original source who's full of all beauty, knowledge, unlimited resource of happiness. And when we focus our minds in that direction, what I'm describing, our original source, the Sanskrit word is Krishna, which means the source of all beauty, the source of all opulence. And so tivrena specifically means to focus your energy so intensely there that it can catch fire, just like using a lens to focus light. And the other word here, I know I put some Sanskrit word there, but Gyanagni Sarvakarmana means when your knowledge is very clear and your determination is clear about what's most important and it's above the modes of nature, then it burns to ashes all the karma. You know the karma we talked about, how your mind's being pushed by previous impressions? That gets burned up and you're left with a very clear, strong purpose and a very devotional heart. And the next slide talks about the symptoms of one who has a strong purpose. These are listed in the ancient wisdom literature. So the person has a sense of urgency, but the sense of urgency is focused on their spiritual development. And then there's a reluctance to waste time. They know what's most important, and they don't like to waste time because it's like they're losing out on the most valuable thing they have, which is time. It's nothing, you can't buy it back. And also the person doesn't zone out, like for no purpose. There's a way that you can recreate or recreate yourself, but it's also, and it's relaxing. And it's like that picture walking off into nature, but you're doing it deliberately, not because you've become overwhelmed or fatigued. And then you just resort to something that's unhealthy, like looking at a screen for no reason, or eating something that's not good for you and just looking out the window, stuffing things in your mouth. Okay, and then the person will feel optimistic. There's a sense of optimism when you know you're doing the right thing. And that's nice. And then I talk about return on attention. We often say return on investment, but what are you getting back for where you're putting your attention? Make sure you're not wasting it. If you put it on just material enjoyment for its own sake, you have diminishing returns. If you focus on your inner happiness, Bhagavad Gita says, you're going to have ever increasing returns. And that's good. As a financial advisor, I would go for the second. So this works. You can find out in your life how well this works by trying it out on your relationships. This is where you're going to get your immediate returns. And you'll notice how powerful your attention is and how your focus is effective, right? Look at this, people. I guarantee you try this right when you get off this call. This is your homework. Give very focused attention to somebody in your life. Don't look away. Don't think I got to go. Just give them some very intense and focused attention, and you'll notice a difference. Animals, if you give them a little attention, they'll immediately respond. Plants love attention, except for orchids. They like to be left alone. And things, if you give attention to the things you have in your life, you'll start sorting out what's important, what's not important. Everything flourishes with attention. So try it on people today. That's your homework. And then we have a few more little sayings to take along with you. The next one is, if you don't like what you're being subjected to, change the subject. Have you ever noticed you like watching something and you go like, I'm outraged by this? And it's like, why are you watching it? It's a good question. I hate that guy. He's like, why are you listening to him? And so if you don't like what you're being subjected to, change the subject. You can do that. That's what humans do best. They can rise above it and deliberately change the subject. And next is, when your mind is a collection point. This is it's a publisher's clearinghouse. And so what are you collecting? What are you keeping in there? And if you're keeping garbage in there, no wonder you're in anxiety. So here's a few focus affirmations to take away today. One is, I review my purpose every morning. Oh, what if you did that? We say it a lot, but what if you actually did it? 2, I plan each day in advance. I prioritize and work on the most important tasks first. And I work single-mindedly to complete each task before moving on to another. If you just did those 4 things, I guarantee you, your life would be happier and more productive. So we already did the experiment. I started with that in the beginning. And at the last, on that list is chant. So this morning, I got up like every other morning. And have you ever noticed when you first get up, your mind goes like, where's the network? What do I tune into? I already knew what I was going to do. I already had it set up. And the first thing I did was I did my chanting. I did my mantra meditation. And I felt so satisfied after I was finished that everything else seemed like a pleasure to take on, as I had already reshaped my mind, my life, and everything, and I had my priorities straight. So chanting, doing mantra meditation is extremely important. We actually have a meeting place. It's called the Mantra Zone. And there you can learn how to do this focused meditation. In fact, tonight we're going to have the Mantra Zone, only we're going to do it we have a park we're going to, where we're going to do some chanting publicly. And it's amazing because people come in from all sections of the city, and people who are just walking by, they join in and they think, oh yeah, the mantra itself has such a mesmerizing and positive effect on me. Maybe I'll try it at home too. Well, that's it, JM. I brought us all the way to 1 o'clock. Thanks everybody for tuning in. It's been an unmitigated pleasure being with all of you today and talking about this. Actually, I was talking about it for myself, but I figured we might as well do it on Zoom. But bringing back these ideas again and again helps us move forward. JM, any announcement?
Yeah, just an announcement. So I shall be on a spiritual trip again, this time to inspire youth. So he's going to India, taking them along to different spiritual places.
Hey, I commute now to India, right?
Yeah. So we are heading into holidays. So we will be on a break for the holiday season, and we'll resume once he's back in January.
Yeah, this time I'm going to take the bus over there. See if I can take bus. Yeah, and we will be making a route through the Himalayas, and hopefully, again, we'll be able to verify that the yogis high in mountain peaks, they come out of their caves, they're looking for fruits, roots, and tubers. And when they see one another on the high peaks, just to encourage one another, they have a custom. They say this phrase over and over again, but they say it loud and clear for each other. It's Hari Bol. It means keep the transcendental vibration going. That's a simple enough direction, isn't it? But they put their hands high in the air. You want to try it before we go? Hari Bol.
Hari Bol. Hari Bol.
Thanks, everybody.
Hari
I'll see you
Bol.
soon.
Cool.
Thank you.
Keep the
Thank you.
transcendental
Thank you.
vibration going.